Below is scene 1 expanded to approximately 1,000 words, written smoothly and without headings, exactly as you asked. Dash dash dash. The hospital always smelled faintly of disinfectant and wilted flowers, a strangely bittersweet mixture that reminded Daniel of both healing and fragility. As he stepped into his mother's room that morning, Maria lay with her eyes half closed, her breathing soft but steady. The heart monitor beside her ticked out its patient rhythm, a slow reassurance that she was still fighting, still here. Daniel had barely left her side since the paramedics brought her in after she collapsed in the kitchen. He still remembered the terror of walking in and seeing her on the floor, one hand reaching weakly toward her phone, her face pale and drawn. Now, sitting beside her bed, he felt that same fear simmering beneath his calm exterior. His wife, Elena, stood near the window, checking her reflection in the glass as the early sunlight softened her features. She tucked a strand of sleek black hair behind her ear, then crossed her arms. "You need to go," she told him again, her tone firm but smooth. "Your boss said it's urgent. If you don't show up, it'll look bad." He rubbed the back of his neck, his gaze drifting back to Maria. I don't want to leave her yet. Not today. She's sleeping, Daniel." Elena's heels clicked softly as she approached the bed. "The doctor said she's stable. And I'll be here. I won't let anything happen." He wanted to believe her. He always wanted to believe her. For years, he had defended her against his mother's gentle but persistent concerns. Maria had never outright accused Elena of anything, but she had a way of hesitating around her, of lowering her voice, of subtly changing the subject whenever Daniel tried to talk about them bonding. He chalked it up to their contrasting personalities. Maria had spent her entire life saving every penny, working double shifts, and living modestly. Elena, meanwhile, loved fine things, designer clothes, expensive skincare, first-class hotels. Their temperaments clashed, but Daniel had convinced himself that in time they would find common ground. He stood up, kissed his mother's forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back soon, okay?" Her eyelids fluttered, as if trying to open, but sleep pulled her back down. Elena touched his arm. "I'll call you if anything changes." He gave a reluctant nod, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of the room. But a weight settled in his chest the moment he stepped into the hallway, a heaviness that only grew as he left the hospital and drove toward the office. The meeting didn't last long. 20 minutes into it, Daniel was barely listening. His mind kept circling back to his mother's fragile figure in that narrow bed, her hand twitching slightly as though reaching for him. His boss, noticing his distraction, sighed and dismissed him. "Just go take care of your family. We'll finish this later." The moment Daniel stepped out of the building, the sense of dread intensified. It wasn't rational, nothing had indicated something was wrong, but instinct gnawed at him like a persistent whisper, urging him to go back. By the time he reached the hospital parking lot, he was almost jogging. He pushed through the main doors, nodded absently to the receptionist, and hurried down the elevator corridor. As he turned into the wing where his mother stayed, he noticed a nurse rushing out of a room, his mother's room, calling urgently for another staff member. Daniel froze, his heart lunging into his throat. "What happened?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. The nurse didn't stop. "I need to get the supervising nurse. Please wait." Her urgency only deepened the dread twisting inside him. Without waiting another second, Daniel moved toward the door. Just as he reached it, he heard his mother's voice, weak, shaky. "Elena, no, please, that medicine makes me dizzy. I told you." His breath caught. He pushed the door open. Inside, Maria was struggling to sit up, her frail hands gripping the blanket. Elena stood inches from her, holding a syringe filled with a clear liquid. The syringe had an unmistakable red label wrapped around it, clearly marked, "Do not administer without physician approval." A label meant to warn even the most inexperienced eyes. "Elena." Daniel's voice cracked through the room like a whip. She spun around, the syringe still tightly in her hand. Her eyes widened in surprise, but only briefly. A second later, her features smoothed into something measured, something defensive. "Daniel, you scared me," she said, forcing a tight smile. "Your mother was getting anxious again. The nurse left this here, so I." The nurse left a restricted medication on an open tray. He cut in sharply, disbelief dripping from his words. His mother reached a trembling hand toward him. "Daniel, I told her not to give me that, I told her." He moved instinctively, stepping between them, his breath uneven. He grabbed the syringe gently but firmly from Elena's hand and looked at it closely. His stomach twisted as he realized exactly what it was. Not a vitamin, not a routine dose, something that could dangerously lower blood pressure, especially for someone already weakened like Maria. Elena, what were you doing? He asked quietly, but his voice shook with anger and fear. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. I was trying to help. She was panicking. Daniel. The nurse shouldn't have left it lying there. I thought. You thought what? He demanded. That you're qualified to make medical decisions now. Maria's voice wavered behind him. She didn't listen to me. Elena's expression hardened. She always panics, Daniel. You know that. She doesn't trust anyone, not even you sometimes. I was trying to calm her down. You were putting my mother in danger, he said, each word trembling with betrayal. This could have killed her. For a moment, something flashed across Elena's face, annoyance, not guilt. It lasted only a second, but Daniel saw it clearly, and it chilled him more than anything else in the room. The door opened and the nurse returned, her eyes widening at the sight of the confrontation. Daniel quickly handed her the syringe, his jaw clenched. She took one look at it and immediately called for a supervisor. Elena stepped back, folding her arms tightly as though bracing herself. Daniel, she said quietly, you're misinterpreting everything. I was just trying to help. But the more she spoke, the more the pieces of the past, small suspicions, ignored comments, quiet warnings from his mother, clicked together like puzzle pieces he had refused to assemble. He looked back at Maria, her eyes wet with fear, and something inside him broke. He had left her in the care of someone he trusted. Someone who should have protected her. Someone who instead almost harmed her. And now that he knew, he could no longer pretend. If you want scene 2 expanded to 1000 words as well, or image prompts for both scenes, just tell me. Below is scene 2 expanded to approximately 1000 words, written smoothly and without headings, with no headings or subheadings as requested. Daniel didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. After the incident with the syringe, the hospital administration took immediate action. They questioned Elena separately, reviewed the nurse's station logs, and pulled security footage from the corridor. Daniel remained in the waiting area, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, staring at the floor while his mind replayed every second of what he'd witnessed. He felt exhausted, but exhaustion couldn't dull the sharp edge of the betrayal cutting through him. The cafeteria was nearly empty by midnight. A few doctors in scrubs sat silently, scrolling through tablets, their faces lit by sterile blue light. Daniel sat in the corner with a cup of coffee he'd barely touched. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, a man who looked older than he felt, drained, confused, and deeply wounded. Every so often, he thought about walking out, getting some air, stepping into the cold night to clear his mind. But every time the thought came, something inside him resisted. He couldn't leave his mother again. By morning, when the sun pushed pale beams through the tall cafeteria windows, a doctor approached him. It was his mother's attending physician, Dr. Mara, a calm man with a decisive way of speaking. He took the seat across from Daniel. We analyzed the syringe your wife was holding, he began, folding his hands. It contained a potent sedative designed for extreme agitation. In your mother's condition, it would have been dangerous, potentially lethal. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, swallowing the nausea that rose in his throat. So it's as bad as I thought. Yes, drive, Mara said. The medication requires physician approval for a reason. Your mother's blood pressure is already unstable. Administering it without proper monitoring could have caused her to lose consciousness or go into shock. Daniel let out a slow, unsteady breath. She said she was helping. The doctor hesitated. I can't speak to her intentions, but the action itself posed serious risk. We're investigating how the syringe ended up unattended. That part is our responsibility, and we will handle it. But I recommend you limit her access to your mother's room for the time being. Daniel nodded numbly. She won't be going near her again. When he finally entered his mother's room, she was awake, sipping warm chamomile tea, her thin hands trembling just slightly as she raised the cup. She looked better than she had the night before, but still fragile, still smaller than he remembered. The machines beeped softly, casting a steady rhythm into the room. Maria smiled when she saw him. A small, tired smile, but one filled with relief. You didn't sleep, she murmured. He took her hand gently. I couldn't. She set down her cup, her gaze studying him with the same soft intensity she'd had when he was a child. Sit down, Daniel. He pulled up a chair, his hands restless in his lap. He didn't know how to begin, or what to say. His thoughts felt tangled, like a knot pulled too tight. Mom, he started, his voice cracking slightly, why didn't you tell me things were this bad between you and Elena? Why didn't you say she was treating you like this? Maria exhaled slowly, her eyes drifting to the window before returning to him. Because you love her. And I didn't want to be the reason you two fought. I didn't want to come between you. He clenched his jaw, guilt seeping into his chest. But she almost, he stopped, trying to steady himself. She could have killed you. Maria stroked the back of his hand with her thumb, soothing him the way she used to when he was overwhelmed. Your wife is complicated, she said softly. She feels threatened by me. She thinks I'm taking your attention away from her. She believes your loyalty is divided. Daniel shook his head. That's not true. You're my mother. That's not divided, it's normal. And she knows that. Maria gave him a knowing look. Not everyone understands the kind of love that isn't measured or competitive. Some people carry their insecurities like heavy stones. And sometimes, those stones make them do things they shouldn't. Daniel stared at her, the weight of her words settling heavily over him. He remembered moments he had dismissed so easily, Alina's impatience when he insisted on checking on his mother, her irritation when Maria called on weekends, the arguments they had over family obligations. He had always assumed Elena just wanted more time with him. He had never imagined it could lead to something like this. Later that afternoon, after Maria had fallen asleep again, Daniel received a message that Elena was waiting for him in the lobby. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked downstairs. He found her sitting on a bench near the large indoor plant display, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. When she saw him, she stood abruptly. So, she said, crossing her arms tightly, you believe her over me. He stared at her, trying to find something in her eyes that resembled remorse. But all he saw was indignation. Hurt pride. Angry confusion. I believe what I saw, he replied quietly. And what the doctor confirmed. She's manipulating you, Elena hissed. She always has. She makes you feel guilty so you'll choose her over me. His heart ached. No, she's never asked me to choose. She's never said a single bad word about you. That's her game, Elena said sharply. She plays the victim so you feel responsible for her. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion seeping into his bones. She didn't collapse to manipulate anyone. She didn't ask you to give her medication. She didn't put that syringe in your hand. Elena looked away, her jaw tightening. I was trying to help. She was panicking. You weren't here. You crossed a line, he said, his voice thick with hurt. A line you can't uncross. For a moment, her face softened, and he wondered if she would apologize. But then her expression hardened again, as though she were building a wall between them brick by brick. So what now? She asked coldly. You're done with me. Daniel didn't answer immediately. His heart felt heavy, but his resolve felt steady in a way it hadn't before. What now, he said slowly, is that I protect my mother. And I stop pretending everything is fine. Elena stared at him for several seconds, her face unreadable. Then, without a single word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply across the polished floor until the sound faded into silence. He watched her go, a hollow ache forming in his chest. It wasn't just the end of an argument, it felt like the crumbling of something far deeper, something he had spent years trying to preserve. That evening, Daniel sat beside his mother again as she drifted into a peaceful sleep. He held her hand gently, feeling the warmth of her skin, the fragile pulse beneath it. The machines hummed steadily, but the world around him felt strangely quiet. He didn't know what would happen next with his marriage or with Alina's choices. He didn't know whether they would seek counseling, separate, or try to rebuild something fractured. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity, he had nearly lost the woman who had loved him unconditionally since the day he was born. And he would never let her be in danger again. If you want image prompts for scene 1 and 2, or a scene 3 continuation, just let me know.